Dear students, today we are going to start a new topic from translation studies, which is language and culture. If you have seen or if you have gone through past papers, you must have seen a question in the year of 2022 or 21. Write a note on language, culture, and society. You have already read about all these three phenomena in detail in social linguistics, and you have a lot of knowledge about that. But today we are going to study this topic in the perspective of translation studies. But to revise, we will go through all of these concepts. So let's see the concept of language. As you all know, language is a mean of communication. It is primary vehicle of communication. Through language, what purposes we can achieve? We establish and maintain the relationship. We transmit our culture. We categorize the world. We interpret and organize reality. And if we can achieve all of these things through language, so definitely we can also achieve all of these things through translation. If we are dealing with some language which is unknown or which is new to us, so we will translate that. So we can achieve all of these purposes through translation as well. But the condition is that the language culture and language society and the way the society and that particular culture treats the language, that subject matter, that topic in that language in the same way as you treat the same topic. So in translation studies, it is very important that the concept that you are dealing with in source language and in the target language, they have same values. So it is very important to know the culture and society of both of the languages. So when you will be explaining relationship between language, society and culture, so you will relate it to the translation studies, that why language is important, what is its relation with society, how it is used in society differently, what are its different uses, applications, and how culture can influence any particular topic, any particular subject matter, and how influences the use of language while describing that concept. There are three main functions of language. Cultural perspective. It is primary means of preserving the culture and medium of transmitting the culture of the new generations. Culture can only be transferred through language. It helps establish and preserve community by linking individuals into communities of the shared identity. Societal level, it is important to all aspects of human interaction because it often relates to the political goals also. At societal level also, there are many wars, there are many conflicts which occur or which are prevalent because some communities or some group of people, they are fighting the battle of their language, prominence of their language, or maybe they want to give some sort of status to their language. Now let's discuss the culture. What is culture? Culture is the collection of characteristics shared by a community. Culture is the way. It is the way of life. It is the way of anything that you do in a particular society. It can distinguish you by other communities. It can give you a specific kind of identity in different communities. And it can be learned by other people. Different communities have some common or different characteristics which are called cultural values. In culture, we mostly include eminent characteristics that exist rare in others. One quality of a culture is definitely different from the qualities of other cultures. Culture is something which is very individual, which is very particular, which is very exclusive. So it makes a nation or a group of people different from the other people. Now, the question is, as I have told you that in your past papers, there is a question, the relationship between language, culture, and society. So, when you will be dealing this topic, you will first explain the language, then you will explain the culture, and then you will explain the relationship between language and culture. So, the structure of language determines the way the language that a speaker of that language view the language of world. क्या मतलब है इसका कि एक लैंग्वेज का जो स्ट्रक्चर होता है वो डिटर्मिन करता है कि एक इंसान उस इंसान का जो उसके इर्द गिर्द की जो दुनिया है, जो उसकी रियलिटीज़ हैं, उसको कैसे देखता है. इन अदर वर्ड्स, योर लैंग्वेज कैन इन्फ्लुएंस योर थिंकिंग. Culture is reflected in language. Cultural requirement do not determine structure of language but influence how it is used. वो कहते हैं कि culture is reflected in language. It does not determine the structure of language but it influences language. How you use language, it is influenced by culture. Your culture will be very much prominent in the use of your language. Then you will mention Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. There were two American linguists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf. They have done a lot of work in this regard. So let's see what are their hypotheses. According to Sapir, human beings do not live in a society alone. Language of the society predispose certain choices of interpretation about how we view the world. Like the language itself influences your opinions, your perception about the world. Language forms your opinions or it influences your thought process. According to Whorf, we dissect nature along lines laid down by our native languages. He says that the way we see nature or the world, it is influenced by native languages, because the way we learn our native languages, when we are learning the native language, we are not only learning the language but actually we are learning the ways of life. We are getting details about life, about the whole world around us. So we are not only gaining language, we are gaining our wisdom, our opinions, our personality through language. We categorize objects in the scheme laid by the language. If we do not subscribe to these classification, we cannot talk or communicate. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis consists of two associated principles. This hypothesis is based on two principles: linguistic determinism and linguistic relativity. Now let's see what are these two concepts. Linguistic determinism is that language may determine our thinking patterns, the way we view and think about the world. We have already discussed that. Linguistic determinism is also called strong determinism. Linguistic determinism means that language determines or it decides or it chalks out the way, the passage on which we walk and we actually learn about the world. It is not only the linguistic knowledge but also the worldly knowledge. One well-known example Whorf used to support his theory was the number of words the Eskimo language has for snow. For example, they have spun snow on the ground, Quanica hard snow on the ground. So because they have snow all around them, so they have so many words to describe snow. So Arabic has many words for different kinds of camels. In Chinese there is only one term, Liuto, and in English there is camel. So it depends on the usage of some object that we have category of words. Now let's see what is linguistic relativity. The less similar the language is, more diverse their conceptualization of the world. Different language view world differently. If we have more languages and if they are not similar, they are different. So their way of conceptualization the world would be different. For example, if one speaker is Punjabi speaker and one speaker is English speaker, or one speaker is Pashtun speaker, or one speaker is French speaker, so their conceptualization of the world will be entirely different. This is called linguistic relativity. Their thoughts will be different, their thinking process will be different, their ideology will be different, and their difference will lie in their languages, because through their languages they have conceptualized the world around them. This concept is called linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity is altogether a separate topic which has been given in your paper repeatedly. So we will deal this topic separately in detail also. So this is an important topic that you have to cover. We have some more concepts about linguistic relativity. Speakers of different languages perceive the world differently. These are its main contents which can describe linguistic relativity. It says that language influence thinking. Linguistic difference between cultures are associated with cultural differences in thinking. Viewpoints vary from language to language. So language influences all the cognitive, all the comprehensive, all the domains that are related to human thoughts, human personality, human ideology. So everything is influenced by language according to linguistic relativity. The structure doesn't determine the view, but is still extremely influential in predisposing speakers of a language towards adopting a particular worldview. Language structure does not influence the thoughts and the ideology, but the speaker of language, they have different worldview based on their language knowledge. Different languages represent different ways of thinking about the world around us. The Wolffian perspective is that translation between one language and another is at the very least problematic, because as we have discussed that two languages or two speakers of two languages, they have different ideology because they have different language. So to translate these two languages, it can be problematic and sometimes impossible, because the difference is so huge which cannot be minimized. One such example of the Punjabi word झूठ, आप एक वर्ड देख लें जो हमारे पास झूठ है पंजाबी लैंग्वेज. So there is a close relationship between language and thought. Language may not determine the way we think, but it does influence the way we perceive and remember, and it affects the case with which we perform mental tasks. अब आप झूठ को किस तरह से ट्रांसलेट कर सकते हैं? हमारी इस वर्ड के बारे में जो आप कह लें जो कॉनोटेशन है वो डिफरेंट है. या इसके अलावा भी अगर हम एक चीज़ सोचें, इफ़ वी टेक अ वर्ड लाइक dog from Urdu, kutta from Urdu, so our thoughts and our ideology or our connotation about the animal dog is quite different from the connotation of the English speaker, who will think differently about the dog. We don't seem to be very fond of dogs, and we don't like to keep them in our houses mostly because it is not accepted in our culture and religion. But in the opinion of English speakers, it is a loyal animal, not only an animal, it is a pet and a family member. So they treat the animal as a symbol of loyalty, love, friendship. So when we are going to use this object, this word dog, kutta, so the translation, if you translate the same word, you can translate it from kutta to dog, but you cannot translate the feel behind that. So that feel which is different, that is due to the cultural and societal difference. So you can add more examples like that when you are going to explain this topic. What can be the effects of culture on language? Culture influences language acquisition from the very early stage through the entire development process, because a child is not only born into some speaking family but also he is born into some culture. So he is not only borrowing language but also culture, and culture influences all aspects of language. It is through the use of language that an individual is transformed into an agent of culture. How we become agent of culture, how we become the lover of some sort of culture, because we are taught that culture through some language. It is the medium of culture. Culture has a powerful influence on verbal and non-verbal encoding and decoding processes. The way we encode and decode any sort of information, that will be influenced by our culture. It will be influenced by our views, which will subsequently are formed. They will be formed by our culture, by our society. So culture affects not only language, lexicons, words, but also the function or the pragmatics. You know what are pragmatics and what are the functions that we may achieve. Change in society may produce corresponding linguistic changes. When society changes, so linguistic attributes also change. When there is a change in culture, when there is a change in society, the definitely change will also prevailing in language also. Okay, in US the use of I, we is prevalent, but in Japan there are cultural rules governing how to refer self and other. It is dependent largely on the status relationship between you and the other person. You will use in Japanese according to the status between two people. This reflects the importance of status and group differentiations in Japan. Okay, so similarly there can be a lot of differences in different languages owing to their culture. So when you want to translate some language into other language, you have to learn their culture. High with low context cultures. This has to do with the extent to which the specific contents of messages are spelled out. In low context cultures, everything is made crystal clear. No need to read between lines. It should be very much clear. But part of no, don't you understand, mode of communicating. The opposite is the rule. It is true for high context cultures. If you don't read between the lines and understand the cultural context of the words used, you won't get the meaning of what was said because it is hidden. All the concepts are not obvious, they are written between lines. So you have to understand the culture and the hidden implications behind that. So these are called high and low context cultures that you have to learn if you want to translate some content. So that's all for today. We will continue this lecture into the relationship between language and society and translation studies. Thank you.